This is the story of what happened when Nikola Jokic spent 11 years with the Denver Nuggets and never once found himself on a 10-game winning streak until the final weeks of the 2025-26 season changed everything. 10 straight wins, the longest run the franchise had seen since 2013, and numbers during that stretch that no player in the history of professional basketball had ever produced. We're going to break down how this streak happened, what Jokic did during those 10 games that stands alone across 1.4 million spans in NBA history, and why any team watching the Western Conference playoffs this spring should be paying close attention. The first 60 games of Denver's 2025-26 season read like a medical report, with injuries stacking up, defensive breakdowns appearing at the worst moments, and late-game collapses becoming a recurring theme. After Game 70, the Nuggets sat at 42 wins and 28 losses, a record that was fine by some standards but nowhere near championship caliber, and nobody around the league was circling Denver on their list of teams to worry about. Their longest winning run before this stretch had reached just 7 games back in November, when the roster was still relatively healthy and the season felt full of promise. That promise faded through 3 difficult months, and what replaced it was a grind, a survival mode that tested the locker room in ways winning never does. And then came Memphis. On the road in mid-March, the Nuggets dropped a 125-118 decision to the Grizzlies, a team that would close the year with just 25 wins, and the loss landed hard. Coach David Adelman described the broader stretch this way: "I feel like we played really well to start, then we survived for 3 months, and now we're playing really well again." That survival period, those brutal middle months, makes everything that followed feel earned rather than accidental. Starting March 26th, Denver began winning, and they did not stop. Game 1 of the run brought a 142-135 win over the Dallas Mavericks, followed immediately by a 135-129 decision over the Utah Jazz, and then a 116-93 blowout of the Golden State Warriors that announced to anyone watching that something had genuinely shifted with this team. Utah fell again on the road, 130-117, and the wins kept arriving, each one adding weight to what was quietly becoming the longest winning streak of the entire Nikola Jokic era. Adelman acknowledged the schedule had cooperated, stating plainly, "When your schedule breaks your way, you have to take advantage of it, and we've done that." But winning 10 straight in the NBA requires more than a favorable calendar, and anyone suggesting otherwise has not watched enough professional basketball. Denver was also getting healthier, moving the ball more fluidly, defending with more consistency, and riding a center who was dismantling opponents in ways that defied easy description. What nobody expected, even among Nuggets fans who had watched Jokic for over a decade, was just how historically dominant his numbers during those 10 games would turn out to be. Opta Stats tracked every 10-game span in NBA history, regular season and playoffs combined, and arrived at a number that puts the scale of this in context. Over 1.4 million recorded spans total, covering every era, every dynasty, every player the sport has ever produced. During Jokic's 10-game winning streak, no player in any of those 1.4 million spans had ever combined for more points, rebounds, and assists. The totals were 252 points, 145 rebounds, and 127 assists across 10 games, which translates to per-game averages of 25.2 points, 14.5 rebounds, and 12.7 assists. And those numbers came while the Nuggets were actively managing his minutes with the playoffs approaching. The individual game lines during this run deserve their own examination. Against San Antonio in overtime, Jokic posted 40 points on 13 of 25 shooting, paired with 8 rebounds, 13 assists, and 3 blocks across 44 minutes, delivering one of the most complete single-game performances of the entire season at the exact moment his team needed it most. 4 days later against Portland, another overtime game, and another line that reads like a typo: 35 points, 14 rebounds, 13 assists, 5 steals, and 2 blocks in 43 minutes. Then came Game 10, the clinching win over Memphis, and this is where the Jokic blueprint becomes clearest. He finished with 14 points, 16 rebounds, and 10 assists in just 31 minutes, recording his 34th triple-double of the season without forcing a single possession. Jamal Murray led all scorers that night with 26 points, knocking down 5 of 10 from 3 and converting all 5 of his free throw attempts, and 8 different Denver players reached double figures. None of that would have unfolded the same way without Jokic anchoring every possession and making the right read before the defense could recover. The win streak sits inside a larger story about what this season has become for Jokic, and the full season numbers paint a portrait of a player operating somewhere beyond what the position was ever designed to do. His averages across the entire year stand at 27.8 points, 12.9 rebounds, and 10.9 assists per game, and he leads the entire league in both rebounds and assists simultaneously. Here's the thing about that. No player in NBA history has ever finished a season leading the league in both of those categories, not in the same year and not across separate seasons either. With just a couple of games left on the schedule, Jokic stands on the edge of doing something the sport has never recorded. His 66.9% true shooting percentage leads every player averaging at least 20 points per game in the league. And among the 201 players who logged at least 200 drives this season, only Giannis Antetokounmpo generated more efficient offense, at 1.26 points per possession compared to Jokic's 1.23. Tucked inside all of this production sits another milestone closing fast. That 34th triple-double of the season pushed his career total to 198, leaving him too shy of joining former teammate Russell Westbrook in the 200 career triple-doubles club. Adelman captured the season's strange shape better than any statistics could. This whole season's been unique, man. We played really well to start, survived for 3 months, and now we're playing really well again. Surviving those 3 months without the roster falling apart and then producing this kind of basketball on the other side separates a good team from one worth fearing. Jokic does not do this alone, and the players around him during this streak have earned their share of the credit. Murray's 26-point performance in the clinching win over Memphis was built on real efficiency, not just volume, and his ability to break down defenses and knock down shots from 3 opened passing lanes that Jokic converted into assists all night long. Tim Hardaway Jr. operated as one of the quietest difference makers of the entire run, averaging 13.5 points on 44.9% shooting during the streak and connecting at 40.9% from beyond the arc. And the number that tells the full story of his value is this. Denver's record in games where Hardaway finishes with a positive plus-minus sits at 37 wins and 9 losses on the season. When he plays well, the Nuggets almost always win, and during this 10-game stretch, he played well consistently. Aaron Gordon's contribution showed up less in the box score and more in the mindset he brought to the locker room. When asked about the significance of climbing from 6th to 3rd in the Western Conference during the streak, Gordon kept the focus narrow. "I don't think we cared about the standings so much as we cared about how we were playing." That kind of answer, process-focused and unimpressed by the moment, reflects exactly the mentality a playoff-bound team needs its veterans to carry. Even with key reserves Peyton Watson and Spencer Jones both missing time during the run, Denver kept stacking wins, and that depth under pressure is not a small thing when the postseason arrives. 6th place in the Western Conference is where Denver started this streak, and 3rd place is where it delivered them, a climb that came with a current record of 52 wins and 28 losses, sitting 1.5 games clear of the Los Angeles Lakers and Houston Rockets for that 3rd seed. 2 games remain on the regular season schedule, and both of them are against teams at the top of the conference. The Oklahoma City Thunder, who lead the West at 64 wins and 16 losses, and the San Antonio Spurs, who sit second at 61 and 19. Those matchups will test everything Denver has built during this run, and there is one genuine concern heading into them. Jokic entered the final days of the regular season listed as questionable with a wrist injury, and with the playoffs days away, the organization may choose caution over competition. If he sits, Jonas Valanciunas would presumably return to the starting lineup, stepping into a role he had not occupied since the 128-125 win over Utah back on March 2nd. Nobody in Denver, though, is treating this as a crisis, and the momentum this team has built over 10 consecutive wins does not disappear because of one absence. This is what happened when the Denver Nuggets finally got healthy, tightened their rotations, and gave Nikola Jokic 10 games to remind the league what he is capable of at full speed. 10 consecutive wins, the longest such streak the franchise had produced since before Jokic was ever drafted. The most combined points, rebounds, and assists across any 10-game span in the 1.4 million such spans recorded in NBA history. A player 2 games away from leading the league in both rebounds and assists simultaneously, something nobody had ever accomplished. A team that entered the stretch in 6th place and climbed to 3rd, 2 games left against the best teams in the West before the playoffs begin. The Nuggets spent 3 months surviving this season, and they came out the other side playing the best basketball anyone in the league has produced in over a decade, with the same second-round pick from 2014 at the center of every possession that mattered. Any team drawing Denver in the first round already knows what's coming, and knowing does not make it easier to stop.